Our story begins not in a bustling city, but in the tranquil, meticulously manicured suburbs of Meadow Creek. It's the kind of place where lawns are always green, mailboxes are always straight, and everyone knows everyone else's business. This is where Sarah, our narrator, and her family moved just a few months ago. After years of apartment living, they finally achieved the dream of owning a home with a backyard, and, most importantly, a sparkling blue swimming pool. Sarah was beyond excited. She envisioned lazy summer afternoons spent lounging by the pool with her kids, splashing around and soaking up the sun. It was her little slice of paradise, a reward for all their hard work. But Meadow Creek, like any suburban Eden, had its serpent. Her name was Patricia, but everyone, behind her back, of course, called her HOA Karen. Patricia was the self-appointed guardian of Meadow Creek's rules and regulations. Any infraction, no matter how small, was met with a sternly worded letter and a passive-aggressive lecture. Sarah had heard the stories about Karen. How she measured the height of everyone's grass, how she complained about the color of Mrs. Henderson's petunias, how she once even left a note on someone's car for parking an inch over the designated line. Sarah hoped to avoid crossing paths with her, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. This story is about how Sarah's dream of a peaceful pool was shattered and how she decided to take matters into her own hands, resulting in a rather colorful situation. Now, about this HOA Karen, Patricia. She wasn't just strict, she seemed to genuinely enjoy enforcing the rules, finding a strange sort of power in it. Some said she was bored, others claimed she had a personal vendetta against anyone who dared to deviate from her vision of suburban perfection. Whatever the reason, she was a force to be reckoned with. Patricia lived 2 houses down from Sarah, a prime location for keeping a watchful eye on the neighborhood. Her house was, unsurprisingly, immaculate. The lawn was always perfectly manicured, the hedges were precisely trimmed, and the flower beds were bursting with perfectly symmetrical rows of colorful blooms. It was almost unsettling. Sarah, on the other hand, was more laid back. She cared about her yard, of course, but she wasn't obsessed with perfection. A few dandelions in the grass. No big deal. A slightly crooked garden gnome. Adds character. She believed in living and letting live, a philosophy that was about to be seriously tested. Sarah was a graphic designer, working from home so she could be there for her kids, 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Tom. She loved her job, loved her kids, and now, she loved her pool. It was her escape, her sanctuary. Little did she know, that sanctuary was about to become a battleground in a suburban war. A war against perfectly trimmed hedges and excessively enforced rules. A war against HOA Karen. The stage was now set. It was a Saturday in July, the kind of day that screamed pool party. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees. Sarah had finished her morning work and was ready to unwind. Lily and Tom were already in their swimsuits, bouncing with excitement. Sarah spread out a large beach towel on a lounge chair, grabbed a book, and applied sunscreen. Life was good. The pool shimmered invitingly, its clear blue water reflecting the cloudless sky. Sarah lowered herself in, letting the coolness wash over her. Lily and Tom splashed and giggled, chasing each other around with inflatable noodles. For a moment, everything felt perfect. She closed her eyes, soaking in the warmth of the sun and the sound of her children's laughter. This was exactly what she had dreamed of. This was why they had moved here. This was enjoying the pool, Sarah. The voice, sweet as honey but with a distinct undertone of steel, shattered the idyllic scene. Sarah opened her eyes to see Patricia, HOA Karen herself, standing at the edge of the pool deck, a sickly sweet smile plastered on her face. The battle was about to begin. The peace and quiet of Sarah's perfect day was about to be disrupted in a major way. Sarah forced a smile, trying to hide her annoyance. Yes, Patricia, it's lovely. Perfect weather for a swim. She hoped that would be the end of it, but she knew, deep down, that Patricia wasn't just making small talk. "It certainly is," Patricia replied, her eyes scanning the pool area with a critical gaze. "Your pool is looking very blue." Sarah resisted the urge to roll her eyes. "Thank you. We try to keep it clean." Patricia chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Well, you know what they say, cleanliness is next to godliness." She paused, then continued, her voice taking on a slightly sweeter tone. "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. It's my daughter Tiffany's birthday tomorrow, and she's turning 8. We were planning a little party, but..." Sarah braced herself. "Here it comes. But our community pool is closed for maintenance. Such a shame. Tiffany is just heartbroken. She was so looking forward to having all her friends over for a swim." Patricia's voice dripped with false sympathy. "I was just thinking, your pool is so lovely, and Tiffany would be absolutely thrilled." She trailed off, leaving the unspoken request hanging in the air. Sarah knew exactly what Patricia was getting at, and the thought of it made her blood boil. The perfect summer day was quickly turning into a perfect storm. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "Patricia, I appreciate you thinking of us, but I'm afraid that won't be possible." Patricia's smile faltered slightly. "Oh. Why not? It would just be for a few hours. We'd be very careful, of course." "It's not about being careful," Sarah explained, trying to sound as polite as possible. "It's our private pool. We have plans for tomorrow, and frankly, I'm not comfortable with a large group of children using it without my supervision." Lily and Tom, sensing the tension, stopped splashing and looked up at their mother with worried eyes. Sarah gave them a reassuring smile. Patricia's voice hardened. "But it's just a birthday party. It would mean so much to Tiffany." "I understand that, Patricia, but I have to consider my own family," Sarah said firmly. "I'm sorry, but the answer is no." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Well, I was just trying to be neighborly." She huffed, then turned to leave. "I hope you reconsider, Sarah. It would be a shame if something unfortunate were to happen to that beautiful pool of yours." With that veiled threat hanging in the air, Patricia stalked off, leaving Sarah feeling shaken and angry. This was exactly the kind of entitled behavior she had heard about. And it was about to get a whole lot worse. The gauntlet had been thrown. The battle lines were drawn. And Sarah was ready to fight for her little slice of paradise. Despite Patricia's thinly veiled threat, Sarah refused to let her ruin the rest of the day. She tried to shake off the unsettling feeling and focus on her kids. They swam and played until dinner time, and for a while, Sarah almost forgot about the encounter with Patricia. However, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to happen. She decided to run a quick errand to the grocery store. She needed to pick up a few things for dinner, and she figured it would be a good opportunity to get out of the house for a bit. "I'll be back in about an hour," Sarah told Lily and Tom. "Just stay in the backyard and keep an eye on each other. And don't go near the front yard, okay?" "Okay, Mom," they replied in unison, already back in the pool. Sarah hesitated for a moment, a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Should she stay home? Should she call a friend to come over? She ultimately decided that she was being paranoid. Patricia wouldn't dare do anything, would she? "I trust you too," Sarah said, trying to sound confident. "I'll be back before you know it." She grabbed her purse and keys and headed out the door, leaving Lily and Tom splashing happily in the pool. Little did she know, that would be the last moment of peace she would have for a very long time. The stage was set for Patricia to make her move. The trap was about to be sprung. The grocery store was only a few minutes away, but the entire time Sarah was there, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She rushed through the aisles, grabbing the items on her list as quickly as possible. The feeling of unease grew stronger with each passing minute. As she pulled into her driveway, she could hear the unmistakable sound of children's laughter. But it wasn't just Lily and Tom's laughter. There were dozens of voices, high-pitched and excited, filling the air. Sarah's heart sank. She just knew, what she was about to find. She parked the car, grabbed the grocery bags, and hurried towards the backyard. As she rounded the corner of the house, her jaw dropped. Her beautiful, peaceful pool area had been transformed into a chaotic, screaming, splashing free-for-all. Kids were everywhere, splashing and yelling, their parents lounging on her patio furniture, drinking lemonade and chatting as if they were at a resort. And there, in the middle of it all, holding court like the queen of the pool party, was Patricia. She saw Sarah and gave her a smug, self-satisfied smile. The audacity. The sheer, unmitigated gall. Sarah couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her worst nightmare had come true. The invasion had begun. And Sarah was ready to declare war. The scene was utter chaos. Inflatables shaped like unicorns and flamingos bobbed in the water, dodging the flailing limbs of a dozen children. Wet towels lay strewn across the patio furniture, mingling with empty juice boxes and half-eaten cupcakes. The air was thick with the smell of chlorine and sunscreen, punctuated by the shrieks of delighted children and the murmur of adult conversation. Lily and Tom, looking bewildered and slightly overwhelmed, were sitting on the edge of the pool, watching the chaos unfold. They looked relieved to see their mother. A boombox blared pop music, adding to the cacophony. A cooler overflowed with soda cans and ice. A table groaned under the weight of chips, dips, and other party snacks. It looked like a scene from a movie, but it was happening in Sarah's backyard, in her pool, without her permission. Patricia, dressed in a ridiculously large sun hat and sunglasses, was holding a glass of lemonade and chatting animatedly with another mother. She looked completely unfazed by Sarah's arrival, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. The level of entitlement was astounding. Sarah felt a surge of anger unlike anything she had ever experienced before. This wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. This was a blatant disregard for her property, her privacy, and her rights. This was war. And Sarah was about to unleash her fury. With her grocery bag still clutched in her hands, Sarah marched towards Patricia, her face a mask of fury. The music seemed to fade into the background as she approached, her footsteps deliberate and determined. "Patricia," she said, her voice loud enough to cut through the noise. "What is the meaning of this?" Patricia turned, her smile unwavering. "Oh, Sarah. You're back. I was just telling everyone how kind you were to let us use your pool." Sarah's jaw dropped. "Kind? I did not let you use my pool. I specifically told you no." Patricia shrugged, as if Sarah was being unreasonable. "Well, Tiffany was so disappointed, and it's such a beautiful day. I just couldn't bear to see her upset. Besides," she added with a dismissive wave of her hand, "it's just for a little while." "A little while?" Sarah repeated, incredulous. "Patricia, this is my property. You can't just invite yourself and a dozen other people over without my permission." Some of the other parents started to look uncomfortable, but Patricia remained defiant. "Oh, relax, Sarah. It's not hurting anything. In fact, I think everyone is having a wonderful time." She gestured to the children splashing in the pool. "Look at them. They're so happy." Sarah's anger reached a boiling point. "Happy at my expense. This is unbelievable, Patricia. You need to get everyone out of my pool right now." The confrontation had begun. The gloves were off. And Sarah was ready to fight dirty. "Patricia, you are not listening to me," Sarah said, trying to control her voice, though it was shaking with rage. "This is my private property. I pay for this pool. I pay for the water, the chemicals, the upkeep. You can't just waltz in here and use it like it's some kind of public park." Patricia rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Sarah. It's just a pool. And we're being very careful. We're not making a mess. Sarah gestured to the scattered towels, empty juice boxes, and floating inflatable toys. Are you kidding me? Look around, Patricia. This is a disaster. My kids can't even enjoy their own pool because you've taken it over. Well, they're welcome to join the party, Patricia said with a saccharine smile. The more the merrier. That's not the point. Sarah exclaimed, her voice rising again. The point is that you didn't ask. You didn't even have the decency to call and see if it was okay. You just assumed that you could do whatever you wanted. Some of the other parents started to murmur amongst themselves, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating confrontation. One woman even started gathering her children, preparing to leave. Patricia, however, remained unfazed. I thought we were neighbors, Sarah. I thought we were friends. Friends don't invade each other's property and throw unauthorized pool parties. Sarah retorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The situation was spiraling out of control, and Sarah knew she needed to do something drastic to regain control of her backyard. But what? Patricia's eyes narrowed. You know, Sarah, I'm on the HOA board. I've seen your landscaping. I seem to recall a certain overhang on your back patio that might not be up to code. Sarah's blood ran cold. She had been so focused on the pool that she had almost forgotten who she was dealing with. Patricia wasn't just a pushy neighbor, she was a power-hungry rule enforcer with a vendetta. Are you threatening me, Patricia? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. I'm simply pointing out that everyone has their flaws, Patricia said with a smug smile. And sometimes, it's best to be cooperative. Sarah realized she was trapped. She couldn't win. If she continued to argue, Patricia would undoubtedly report her to the HOA for some minor infraction, resulting in fines and more headaches. But if she backed down, Patricia would get away with her entitled behavior, and Sarah would lose control of her own property. Fine, Sarah said, her voice heavy with defeat. You can stay. But everyone needs to be gone by 6 o'clock. And you are responsible for cleaning up every single mess. Patricia beamed. Wonderful. I knew you'd see reason. She turned to the other parents. All right everyone, party until 6. But make sure to clean up after yourselves. We don't want to upset our gracious hostess. Sarah wanted to scream. She wanted to throw Patricia into the pool, clothes and all. But she knew that wouldn't solve anything. She needed a plan. She needed revenge. And she needed it fast. She pretended to acquiesce, but inside, she was plotting. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Sarah spent the next few hours seething. She forced herself to smile and nod at the other parents, pretending to be a gracious hostess, but inside, she was a volcano waiting to erupt. She watched as the kids splashed and played, oblivious to the tension simmering beneath the surface. She saw Patricia, smug and self-satisfied, flitting around like she owned the place. The injustice of it all was almost unbearable. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah started to formulate a plan. It had to be something that would send a clear message to Patricia, something that would make her regret ever setting foot on Sarah's property. It had to be spectacular. She surreptitiously grabbed her phone and started searching online. Non-toxic pool dye. The results flooded her screen. She scrolled through the options, looking for something that was both dramatic and safe for the environment. Neon green. Perfect. She found a website that sold a concentrated, temporary pool dye in a vibrant shade of neon green. It was non-toxic, biodegradable, and guaranteed to last for several hours before fading away. It was exactly what she needed. She quickly placed an order, selecting express shipping. The dye would arrive tomorrow morning, just in time for her to put her plan into action. In the meantime, she would bide her time, pretending to be defeated, while secretly preparing for the ultimate act of revenge. Patricia may have won this battle, but Sarah was determined to win the war. And she was about to get very, very green. With the die ordered and the plan set, Sarah focused on getting through the rest of the day. At 6 o'clock sharp, she politely but firmly reminded Patricia that it was time for everyone to leave. To her surprise, Patricia actually complied. She herded the children together, gathered the remaining party supplies, and thanked Sarah, with a decidedly insincere smile, for her generosity. As the last of the guests filed out of her backyard, Sarah surveyed the scene. It was a disaster. Empty cups, crumpled napkins, and half-eaten snacks littered the patio. The pool was murky and filled with floating debris. It would take hours to clean up. But Sarah didn't care. She had a bigger plan in mind. She enlisted Lily and Tom's help in cleaning up the worst of the mess, wanting them to feel like they were part of her scheme for retribution. They didn't know the specifics of her plan, but they could tell that something exciting was about to happen. After the cleanup was complete, Sarah tucked Lily and Tom into bed, promising them a fun surprise in the morning. Then, she waited. She paced the floor, checking the tracking information for her package of neon green dye every few minutes. She couldn't wait to see the look on Patricia's face when she saw what Sarah had done. The anticipation was almost unbearable. It was going to be a long night. But it would be worth it. Oh, so worth it. Unfortunately, the express shipping was a lie. The dye didn't arrive the next morning. It didn't arrive by noon. Sarah was starting to panic. Her plan was contingent on Patricia using the pool again for Tiffany's actual birthday party. She knew that Patricia would likely strike again, but the longer she waited, the less likely it became. Finally, at around 5 p.m. on Sunday, a delivery truck pulled up to her curb. Sarah practically ripped the package out of the delivery driver's hands and ran inside. It was time. She waited until dusk, when the neighborhood was quiet and the only sound was the chirping of crickets. She peeked over the fence and saw that Patricia and her guests were indeed back in the pool, celebrating Tiffany's birthday. The music was playing, the kids were splashing, and Patricia was holding court, just like yesterday. Sarah grabbed the container of neon green dye and crept out into her backyard. She moved stealthily through the shadows, making her way towards the pool. Her heart was pounding in her chest. This was it. The moment of truth. She took a deep breath, unscrewed the cap of the dye container, and prepared to unleash her masterpiece. The pool was about to get a whole lot greener. And Patricia was about to learn a very valuable lesson about respecting boundaries. The final act was about to begin. Holding her breath, Sarah poured the entire container of neon green dye into the pool. The liquid swirled and spread, transforming the clear blue water into a shockingly bright, almost radioactive green. The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. A collective gasp went up from the pool. The music stopped abruptly. Kids started screaming. Parents started yelling. All eyes turned to Sarah, who was standing at the edge of the pool deck, a triumphant grin on her face. Patricia, her face a mask of disbelief and fury, sputtered, "What have you done?" "I believe I just added a little color to your party," Sarah said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The partygoers scrambled to get out of the pool, their skin now tinged with a faint green hue. The water was so bright that it glowed in the twilight, casting an eerie green light on everything around it. Tiffany, Patricia's daughter, started to cry. "Mommy, what's happening? I don't want to be green." "It's okay, honey," Patricia said, trying to soothe her daughter, but her eyes were fixed on Sarah, burning with rage. The scene was pure chaos. Kids were running around screaming, parents were frantically trying to wipe the green dye off their children's skin, and Patricia was standing there, speechless, her carefully constructed facade of suburban perfection completely shattered. Sarah had done it. She had successfully turned Patricia's pool party into a radioactive disaster. And she wasn't even a little bit sorry. "You are going to regret this, Sarah." Patricia shrieked, finally finding her voice. I'm calling the police. I'm calling the HOA. You're going to pay for this. Sarah simply shrugged. Go ahead, Patricia. Call whoever you want. The dye is non-toxic and temporary. There's no harm done. Except, of course, to your precious party. The other parents, realizing that the situation was beyond their control, started to gather their children and belongings. They shot angry glances at both Sarah and Patricia as they made their way towards the exit. My daughter's birthday is ruined, one mother exclaimed, glaring at Patricia. Thanks to you and your crazy neighbor. Yeah, thanks a lot, Patricia, another parent chimed in. We're going to have green kids for weeks. Patricia, now completely humiliated and defeated, watched as her carefully planned party disintegrated before her eyes. She turned back to Sarah, her face contorted with rage. I'm going to make your life a living hell, Sarah, she hissed. You haven't seen the last of me. Sarah met her gaze unflinchingly. Bring it on, Patricia. I'm not afraid of you. You messed with the wrong neighbor. She turned and walked back towards her house, leaving Patricia standing alone in her radioactive green pool, surrounded by the remnants of her ruined party. Sarah knew that this was just the beginning of a long and bitter feud. But for now, she allowed herself a small smile. She had struck a blow for all the long-suffering neighbors who had been victimized by HOA Karens everywhere. And it felt glorious. True to her word, Patricia called the police. A squad car arrived a few minutes later, its flashing lights illuminating the radioactive green pool. 2 officers emerged and approached Sarah, who was calmly sitting on her patio, sipping a glass of lemonade. Ma'am, we received a call about a disturbance, one of the officers said, his voice stern. That would be Patricia, Sarah replied, gesturing towards her neighbor's yard. She seems to think I've committed some kind of crime by dyeing my own pool. The officers exchanged a look. Dyeing your pool? One of them asked, clearly confused. Yes, Sarah said, with non-toxic, temporary pool dye. It's perfectly legal. I checked. The officers walked over to the pool and peered into the glowing green water. They looked at each other again, shaking their heads in disbelief. Ma'am, do you realize how bright this is? One of the officers asked. Perfectly, Sarah said with a smile. It's quite the conversation starter, don't you think? The officers sighed. They could tell that they were dealing with a highly unusual situation. They spoke with Patricia briefly, who ranted and raved about Sarah's outrageous behavior, but the officers remained calm and professional. After a few minutes, they returned to Sarah. Ma'am, we've determined that no crime has been committed, one of the officers said. However, we would advise you to consider your neighbors and avoid any further disturbances. I'll keep that in mind, Sarah said, trying to suppress a laugh. The officers got back into their car and drove away, leaving Sarah and Patricia to their simmering feud. The police had come and gone, but the battle was far from over. Just as the police car disappeared down the street, another vehicle pulled up, an HOA car. Out stepped Mr. Henderson, the HOA president, looking bewildered and slightly amused. He walked over to Patricia's yard and surveyed the scene. The glowing green pool, the scattered party supplies, and Patricia's furious expression were quite a sight. Patricia, what in the world is going on here? He asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Patricia launched into a tirade, blaming Sarah for everything. She claimed that Sarah was a menace to the community, a troublemaker who had deliberately sabotaged her daughter's birthday party. She demanded that Mr. Henderson take action, fine Sarah, and force her to drain the pool immediately. Mr. Henderson listened patiently, nodding occasionally. When Patricia finally ran out of steam, he turned to Sarah, who was still sitting calmly on her patio, sipping her lemonade. Sarah, do you have anything to add? He asked. Sarah smiled sweetly. Just that Patricia decided to use my pool without my permission for a second day in a row. And that the dye is non-toxic and will fade away in a few days. Other than that, I have nothing to say. Mr. Henderson sighed. He knew all about Patricia's reputation for being difficult and entitled. He also knew that Sarah was new to the neighborhood and probably didn't realize what she was getting into. Patricia, he said sternly, I think you owe Sarah an apology. Patricia's jaw dropped. An apology? Are you kidding me? I'm quite serious, Patricia, Mr. Henderson said. Using someone else's pool without their permission is unacceptable. And causing a scene like this is not helping anyone. I suggest you go home, calm down, and think about your actions. Patricia, red-faced with anger, stormed off towards her house, muttering under her breath. Mr. Henderson turned to Sarah, a weary expression on his face. I'm so sorry about all of this, Sarah, he said. Patricia can be a bit much sometimes. Just try to ignore her, and hopefully, this will all blow over soon. He then gave a quick look over his shoulder and said in a quieter tone, honestly, between you and me, she's been violating some minor HOA rules herself. I'll be sending her a notice about that shortly. He winked and turned and left. The tide was turning. The next morning, Sarah woke up to a surprisingly quiet neighborhood. The radioactive green pool was still glowing in her backyard, a testament to her act of rebellion. She peeked out the window and saw Patricia's house. The curtains were drawn, and there was no sign of life. Later that day, a letter arrived from the HOA. Sarah braced herself, expecting the worst. But to her surprise, it wasn't a fine or a warning. It was a notice addressed to Patricia. The notice cited several violations of HOA rules, including unauthorized use of common areas, referring to Sarah's pool, excessive noise, and failure to maintain property standards, referring to the mess left after the party. It also stated that Patricia was being fined a significant amount for these violations. Sarah couldn't help but smile. It seemed that Mr. Henderson had followed through on his promise. Patricia was finally getting her comeuppance. A few days later, Sarah received another surprise. A handwritten note was slipped into her mailbox. It was from Mrs. Henderson, the HOA president's wife. Dear Sarah, the note read. I just wanted to say that my husband told me what happened, and I think you're a hero. Patricia has been terrorizing this neighborhood for years. Thank you for finally standing up to her. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to ask. Sarah felt a sense of vindication. She had not only defended her property but had also earned the respect of her neighbors. The neon green pool had become a symbol of resistance against tyranny. And it all started with one entitled HOA Karen and a desperate act of revenge. The neighborhood was never quite the same after that. There was a new sheriff in town. And her weapon of choice was pool dye. The dye faded from the pool water within a week, but the memories of the neon green incident lingered in Meadow Creek. Patricia, humbled and humiliated, kept a low profile for months. She stopped measuring lawns, complaining about petunias, and leaving notes on cars. It was as if the neon green dye had washed away her inner Karen, leaving behind a slightly less obnoxious version of herself. Sarah, on the other hand, became something of a local legend. People would stop her on the street to congratulate her on standing up to Patricia. Some even asked her for advice on dealing with their own difficult neighbors. Life in Meadow Creek returned to normal, but with a subtle shift in the balance of power. People were a little less afraid of the HOA, a little more willing to challenge authority, and a lot more careful about respecting boundaries. As for Lily and Tom, they loved telling the story of the neon green pool to their friends. They saw their mom as a hero, someone who wasn't afraid to stand up for what was right, even if it meant dyeing the water a crazy color. And Sarah? She finally got to enjoy her pool in peace. She spent lazy summer afternoons lounging by the water, watching her kids splash and play, knowing that she had earned her little slice of paradise. The neon green incident had been a wild and chaotic ride, but it had ultimately brought her closer to her family and her community. And that, she realized, was worth more than all the perfectly manicured lawns in Meadow Creek. The end. Or was it? 1 year later. Sarah was hosting her own pool party. It was a small gathering, just a few close friends and neighbors. The water was sparkling blue, the sun was shining, and the atmosphere was relaxed and joyful. Even Mr. and Mrs. Henderson were there, enjoying the festivities. They brought a delicious homemade cake and shared stories about Patricia's latest attempts to improve the neighborhood, which were now met with polite but firm resistance from the community. As Sarah looked around at her friends and family, she couldn't help but smile. She had come a long way since moving to Meadow Creek. She had faced her fears, stood up to a bully, and emerged victorious. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the edge of the pool deck. It was Patricia. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't seen Patricia in months, and she wasn't sure what to expect. Patricia hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and walked toward Sarah. "Sarah," she said, her voice surprisingly subdued, I wanted to apologize." Sarah raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Apologize? For what?" "For everything," Patricia said, looking down at her feet. "For using your pool without permission, for threatening you, for being a Karen." Sarah studied Patricia's face. She looked genuinely remorseful. "I know I can't undo what I did," Patricia continued, "but I want to make amends. I want to be a better neighbor." Sarah considered Patricia's words. She knew that people could change, and she was willing to give Patricia a chance. "Okay, Patricia," Sarah said. "I accept your apology. But you have a lot of work to do to earn back the trust of this neighborhood." Patricia nodded, a small smile gracing her lips. "I know. And I'm willing to do it." Sarah extended her hand. Patricia shook it, and for the first time, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, peace could finally reign in Meadow Creek. The neon green pool may have been a temporary solution, but forgiveness, she realized, could be permanent. So maybe that was a bit too optimistic. While Patricia apologized, things didn't magically become perfect. There were still awkward silences at neighborhood gatherings, and Sarah definitely side-eyed Patricia whenever she saw her near the pool. But, progress is progress, right? Now, let's rewind a bit, back to the immediate aftermath of the green pool incident. We know Patricia called the police, and the HOA, but let's delve into what happened with those calls, from Sarah's perspective. Sitting on her patio, sipping lemonade, Sarah watched the flashing lights of the police car fade into the distance. She knew Patricia wouldn't let it go that easily. Sure enough, a few minutes later, she heard Patricia's shrill voice on the phone, presumably talking to the HOA. "Vandalism, I tell you. She deliberately dyed my pool water. It's an act of war. Yes, I know it's her pool, but it affected my party. I demand you fine her. And make her drain the pool immediately." Sarah chuckled. Patricia's outrage was almost comical. She knew the dye was non-toxic and temporary, so there was nothing the HOA could really do. Still, she braced herself for a visit from Mr. Henderson. She decided to document everything. She took photos of the glowing green water, the empty dye container, and the remnants of the ruined party. She even wrote down a detailed account of the events, just in case Patricia decided to escalate things further. She knew HOA Karen was capable of anything. It was time to settle in and wait for the next act of this suburban drama to unfold. The stage was set for a showdown, HOA style. The police arrived first, sirens wailing as they sped down the usually quiet street. Sarah met them at the front yard, her lemonade in hand and a small smile on her face. She could see Patricia fuming in her own yard, arms crossed and face red with anger. "Ma'am, we received a call about vandalism," the officer said, his tone professional but with a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Someone reported that you dyed your pool." "That's correct, officer," Sarah replied, gesturing towards her backyard. "I used non-toxic, temporary pool dye. It's perfectly safe and legal." The officer raised an eyebrow. Non-toxic, huh? And temporary? Yes, sir. I can show you the product information, if you'd like. The officer nodded. Please do. Sarah led the officers to her patio and showed them the website where she had purchased the dye, highlighting the non-toxic and temporary claims. She also showed them the safety data sheet, which confirmed that the dye was harmless. The officers examined the documents carefully. They even took a small sample of the pool water and performed a quick test to verify that it wasn't harmful. After a few minutes, they returned to Sarah. Okay, ma'am, it appears that the dye is indeed non-toxic and temporary. We can't find any evidence of vandalism or any other crime being committed. Sarah smiled. I'm glad to hear that, officer. I just wanted to add a little color to my pool. The officer chuckled. Well, you certainly accomplished that. Just try to keep the peace, ma'am. And that was that. They left without even speaking to Patricia, confirming what Sarah already knew. Patricia had no real grounds to make any legitimate claims against her. As the police car drove away, a different vehicle approached, Mr. Henderson's sensible sedan. He parked it at the curb and stepped out, his face etched with a mixture of exasperation and amusement. He surveyed the scene, the still glowing green pool, Patricia pacing furiously in her yard, and Sarah calmly sipping her lemonade. Patricia, he said, his voice weary, what's all this about? Patricia launched into another tirade, accusing Sarah of vandalism, disturbing the peace, and generally being a terrible neighbor. She demanded that Mr. Henderson take action, fine Sarah, and force her to drain the pool immediately. Mr. Henderson listened patiently, nodding occasionally. When Patricia finally paused for breath, he turned to Sarah. Sarah, do you have anything to say? Sarah smiled sweetly. Just that Patricia decided to use my pool without my permission for a second day in a row, and that the dye is non-toxic and will fade away in a few days. I think she's just upset that her party was ruined. Mr. Henderson sighed. He knew Patricia's reputation for being difficult. He also knew that Sarah was new to the neighborhood and probably didn't realize what she was getting into. He turned back to Patricia, his voice firm. Patricia, I think you've taken this far enough. Using someone else's pool without their permission is unacceptable, and causing a scene like this is not helping matters. I suggest you go home and let Sarah enjoy her pool in peace. Patricia sputtered, but... Mr. Henderson cut her off. That's enough, Patricia. I'll be in touch. He gave Patricia a stern look before turning to Sarah. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Mr. Henderson took a few steps towards Sarah, lowering his voice so that Patricia couldn't hear. Look, Sarah, he said, his expression apologetic, I'm really sorry about all this. Patricia can be a real handful, as I'm sure you've gathered. She means well, but she often goes about things the wrong way. Sarah nodded, understandingly. I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Henderson. I just want to be a good neighbor, but I also need to protect my property. Mr. Henderson smiled. I completely understand. Don't worry, I'll handle Patricia. She's been pushing the limits for a while now, and this is just the last straw. I'll make sure she gets the message. He winked, then added in an even lower voice, let's just say she's been violating a few HOA rules herself lately. I'll be sending her a notice about that shortly. Consider it, karma. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I really appreciate that. Don't mention it, he said. Just try to enjoy your pool, Sarah. And if you ever have any problems, don't hesitate to call me. I'm on your side. With that, Mr. Henderson turned and walked back to his car, leaving Sarah feeling a sense of relief. It seemed that she had an ally in the HOA, someone who understood her situation and was willing to help. The battle with Patricia was far from over, but at least now she knew that she wasn't alone. The forces of suburban justice were on her side. And they were about to unleash a storm of HOA regulations on poor Patricia. This time, Sarah just got to sit back and watch the fireworks from a safe distance, sipping her lemonade and enjoying the green glow of her pool. True to Mr. Henderson's word, a few days later, a large envelope arrived at Patricia's doorstep. Sarah watched from her window as Patricia retrieved it, her face a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. As Patricia read the contents, her face slowly turned crimson. The letter, written on official HOA letterhead, detailed a long list of violations, including unauthorized use of private property, Sarah's pool. Disturbing the peace, loud music and excessive noise. Failure to maintain property standards, leaving trash and debris. Violation of guest rules, exceeding the maximum number of guests. The letter also stated that Patricia was being fined a substantial amount for each violation, totaling a sum that would definitely make a dent in her meticulously planned budget. Sarah could almost hear Patricia's screams of outrage from her house. She knew that Patricia would be furious, but there was nothing she could do. The HOA had spoken, and their decision was final. The news of Patricia's fine spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People whispered about it over their fences, shared knowing glances at the grocery store, and even exchanged congratulatory high-fives at the community center. It was as if Patricia had finally been brought down to earth, her reign of terror finally coming to an end. For once, the tables had turned and Patricia was held accountable for her actions. This served as a clear message to the rest of the HOA, no one is above the rules, not even Karen. Despite the outpouring of support and the satisfaction of seeing Patricia finally face the consequences of her actions, Sarah couldn't shake a nagging feeling of guilt. Had she gone too far? Was dyeing the pool really the best way to handle the situation? She replayed the events in her mind, wondering if there was anything she could have done differently. Maybe she should have called the police herself when Patricia first started setting up the party. Maybe she should have tried to reason with her more calmly. Maybe, just maybe, she could have avoided the whole neon green fiasco. But then she remembered Patricia's veiled threat, her dismissive attitude, and her complete disregard for Sarah's property. She remembered how Patricia had used her position on the HOA board to try to intimidate her. She remembered how Patricia had made her feel powerless and violated. And the guilt started to fade away, replaced by a sense of vindication. She had stood up for herself, and she had sent a clear message that she wouldn't be bullied or taken advantage of. She had protected her family and her property, and that was all that mattered. Still, she couldn't help but feel a little sorry for Patricia. She knew that Patricia was probably feeling humiliated and angry, and that she would likely hold a grudge for a long time to come. But Sarah also knew that Patricia had brought it all on herself. She had crossed the line, and she had paid the price. It was a harsh lesson, but perhaps it was a necessary one. Maybe, just maybe, Patricia would learn from her mistakes and become a better neighbor in the future. But even if she didn't, Sarah knew that she could handle whatever Patricia threw her way. She was no longer the timid newcomer who was afraid to ruffle feathers. She was a force to be reckoned with. A suburban warrior, armed with pool dye and a newfound sense of confidence. Life slowly returned to normal in Meadow Creek. The initial shock and excitement surrounding the neon green pool incident began to fade, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. The neighborhood was quieter, more respectful, and a lot less, Karen Y. And, as promised, the neon green dye gradually faded from the pool water. After about a week, the water was crystal clear again, with no lingering traces of its radioactive past. The pool was back to its original, sparkling blue glory, a symbol of peace and tranquility. Sarah spent the next few days meticulously cleaning and scrubbing the pool area, removing any remaining traces of the party. She power washed the patio furniture, swept the deck, and vacuumed the pool. She wanted to erase all evidence of Patricia's intrusion, to reclaim her space and restore it to its former state of serenity. As she worked, she reflected on everything that had happened. She realized that the neon green incident had been a turning point, not just for her but for the entire neighborhood. It had been a catalyst for change, a wake-up call that had forced everyone to reevaluate their values and priorities. She also realized that she had learned a valuable lesson about standing up for herself, about protecting her property, and about the importance of community. She had discovered a strength and resilience within herself that she never knew existed. And she had emerged from the experience a stronger, more confident person. As she looked at her sparkling clean pool, she smiled. It was finally hers again. And she was determined to enjoy it, to savor every moment of peace and tranquility, knowing that she had earned it. The neon green pool was a thing of the past, but the lessons she had learned would stay with her forever. For a long time, Patricia and Sarah avoided each other like the plague. If they happened to cross paths at the grocery store or the community center, they would quickly turn and walk in the opposite direction. There were no more passive-aggressive notes, no more veiled threats, and no more unauthorized pool parties. Just a cold, awkward silence. Lily and Tom, however, were fascinated by Patricia. They would whisper about her whenever they saw her, pointing and giggling. Sarah had to constantly remind them to be respectful, even though she secretly found their behavior amusing. One day, Lily came home from school with a story about Patricia's daughter, Tiffany. It turned out that Tiffany was in Lily's class, and she had been telling everyone about the neon green pool incident. She said her mom was really mad, Lily reported. But she also said that it was kind of cool. Sarah laughed. Well, I'm glad someone thought it was cool. Mom, Lily said, her eyes wide with curiosity, do you think Patricia will ever talk to us again? Sarah shrugged. I don't know, honey. It's up to her. But even if she doesn't, it's okay. We have plenty of other friends and neighbors who like us for who we are. And that was the truth. Sarah had built a strong support system in Meadow Creek, a community of friends who valued her honesty, her humor, and her willingness to stand up for what was right. She didn't need Patricia's approval or friendship. She had everything she needed right there, in her sparkling blue pool and in the hearts of her loved ones. The feud may have changed her, but it also showed her who she truly was. And she was proud of it. As time went on, Sarah realized that the neon green pool incident had taught her a lot about herself and about life in general. She had learned that it was important to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable. She had learned that you can't let bullies push you around, and that you have to be willing to fight for what's right. But she had also learned that there are consequences to every action, and that it's important to consider those consequences before you act. Dyeing the pool had been a dramatic and satisfying act of revenge, but it had also created a lot of drama and tension in the neighborhood. It had strained relationships, caused hurt feelings, and created a lasting divide. Looking back, Sarah realized that there might have been other ways to handle the situation, ways that would have been less confrontational and less disruptive. Maybe she could have called the police sooner. Maybe she could have tried to reason with Patricia more forcefully. Maybe she could have involved the HOA earlier. But she also knew that she had done the best she could in the moment, with the information and resources she had available. And she had ultimately achieved her goal, to protect her property and her family from Patricia's entitled behavior. So, while she didn't regret standing up for herself, she did regret some of the fallout from her actions. She realized that it's important to be both assertive and compassionate, to be both strong and kind. It was a delicate balance, but it was one that she was determined to strike in the future. The key to success, it seemed, was acting without becoming a Patricia yourself. Years passed. Lily and Tom grew older, learning to drive, going off to college, and starting lives of their own. Sarah and her husband settled into a comfortable routine, enjoying the peace and quiet of their suburban oasis. Patricia, while never becoming a close friend, eventually mellowed out. She stopped enforcing the HOA rules with such zeal, and even started to participate in neighborhood events, albeit in a more subdued and respectful manner. And Sarah? She finally got to enjoy her pool in peace. She spent countless hours lounging by the water, reading books, listening to music, and soaking up the sun. She watched her children splash and play, creating memories that would last a lifetime. The neon green pool incident became a legendary tale in the neighborhood, a story that was passed down from one generation to the next. It was a reminder that even in the most meticulously manicured suburbs, there was always room for a little bit of rebellion, a little bit of humor, and a whole lot of heart. Sometimes, when Sarah was alone by the pool, she would think about Patricia. She wondered if Patricia ever regretted her actions, if she ever looked back on the neon green incident with a sense of shame or embarrassment. But then she would shake her head and smile. It didn't matter what Patricia thought. What mattered was that Sarah had stood up for herself, that she had protected her property, and that she had created a life that was filled with joy, love, and laughter. And as she floated in the sparkling blue water, surrounded by the warmth of the sun and the gentle breeze, she knew that she had finally found her little slice of paradise. And it was all hers. The end. For real this time.